The wind howls like a wounded beast across the open sky. Inside the belly of a Royal Air Force Halifax, everything vibrates, metal rattling, engines roaring, hearts pounding. Red light floods the cramped cabin, painting the faces of the three figures crouched by the open door. It is March 1943, and below them stretches the black ocean of Nazi-occupied France, a world swallowed in darkness. The commander's voice cuts through the chaos. "Ready?" Odette Sansom grips the straps of her parachute, her knuckles pale in the crimson glow. She glances once at the photograph tucked inside her sleeve, her three daughters smiling on a sunny English lawn. She presses it against her chest, then looks forward. "Set!" Violette Szabo adjusts her Sten gun, the barrel glinting faintly. She's only 22, her husband killed in battle months before. Her jaw tightens, not from fear, but from fury. Somewhere below lies the enemy who tore her life apart. At the back stands Noor Inayat Khan, her fingers brushing the Morse key around her neck like a sacred charm. A poet, a pacifist, now a spy. Her dark eyes are calm, unreadable. She whispers softly to herself, a prayer in the language of peace. Moments before she dives into war, the green light flashes. "Go!" Odette jumps first, swallowed instantly by the night. Violette follows, her parachute opening like a white bloom against the storm. Noor steps forward last, wind tearing at her hair, and leaps into the void. For a heartbeat there is silence, the kind that feels like eternity. Then, the sharp snap of parachutes unfurling. Three white ghosts drift downward through the cold French air, their silk canopies glowing faintly in flashes of distant lightning. Below them, the earth waits. Forests, rivers, villages asleep under the boot of the Reich. Somewhere down there are allies who might help them, or traitors who might sell them. The women know the odds. More than half of those who jump will never return. But they jumped anyway. They are part of Churchill's secret army, the Special Operations Executive. Ordinary women trained to do extraordinary things. Code breakers, saboteurs, couriers. They will carry messages that could change the war. They will blow up trains, gather intelligence, and live under false names, knowing that a single mistake means capture, torture, or worse. As Noor's boots brush the wet grass, she collapses. Her parachute and listens, the night alive with distant barking dogs and the faint hum of a German truck. Somewhere far away, church bells toll midnight. She signals once, twice with a small flashlight, a prearranged code. A shadow moves in the trees, then another. Resistance fighters. She's been found. The three women will never stand side by side again. Their paths will diverge, crossing France like threads of light in a black tapestry, one leading to triumph, one to betrayal, one to sacrifice. And as thunder rolls across the horizon, the narrator's voice fades into the storm. They fell into darkness, so that others could live in light. London, 1942. Fog curls through the narrow streets, thick and ghostly, muffling the distant rumble of air raids. Beneath the surface of the war that everyone can see, another war is being born. One fought in whispers, shadows, and silence. Inside a nondescript townhouse on Baker Street, the sign reads simply, Inter-Services Research Bureau. But behind those doors, the British government hides something extraordinary, a secret organization known only to a few, the Special Operations Executive, or SOE. Their mission, to set Europe ablaze from within. For the first time, they're recruiting women, not as nurses, not as typists, but as spies. Women who can move unseen where men might draw suspicion. Women who can blend into occupied cities, deliver messages, and disappear before anyone realizes they were ever there. The first to be summoned is Odette Sansom, a French-born mother of three. The letter she receives is brief and vague. Report to a military office in London for an interview regarding national service. When she arrives, an officer greets her with a knowing look. "You've been recommended," he says, "for special duties." She hesitates. Her accent betrays her. Fluent French, perfect for enemy territory, but her eyes betray something else. Fear and determination locked in a quiet battle. "I have children," she says softly. "So do many," the officer replies, "but this war will decide what kind of world they grow up in." That night, Odette sits at her kitchen table, staring at 3 sleeping faces in the next room. She folds her hands together and whispers a promise she knows she might not keep. "I'll come back." When dawn comes, she leaves without waking them. In another part of the city, Violette Szabo stands in front of her mirror, fastening the buttons on a black coat. She's only 21, a half-French girl from Brixton who's already lived a lifetime. Her husband, a French soldier, was killed in North Africa. When the SOE recruiter asks her, "Why do you want to serve?" she answers without hesitation, "Because I owe the bastards something." They test her languages, her shooting, her nerve. Violette passes every trial with a grin. Fierce, reckless, electric, she takes to espionage like she was born for it. But beneath that courage lies a wound. A love lost too soon, and a need to strike back before grief consumes her. And then there's Noor Inayat Khan, the most unlikely recruit of them all. The daughter of an Indian Sufi mystic and an American mother, Noor grew up among music and poetry. She believed in peace, in truth, in the beauty of words. When she tells the recruiter she's a pacifist, he raises an eyebrow. "You understand the risk?" "I do," Noor replies softly. "But I also understand evil." She trains as a wireless operator, the most dangerous role of all. Her hands tremble at first as she taps messages on the Morse key, each dot and dash carrying life or death across enemy lines. Her instructor watches her progress and whispers to another agent, "If she's caught with that transmitter, she won't last a week." But Noor doesn't flinch. She learns to send faster than anyone in her class, her calm voice masking an iron will. Training is brutal, designed to break the weak before the war does. Instructors teach them to kill silently with a single movement. They jump from aircraft towers until their legs buckle. They memorize codes, ciphers, false identities. They're taught to lie, to vanish, to trust no one. Every day they hear the same warning. The average field agent lasts 6 weeks. Each woman signs the Official Secrets Act. Each is told that if captured, Britain will deny ever knowing them. And still they stay. Nights at the training camp are restless, the crackle of distant artillery mixing with whispers of fear. Odette writes letters she can never send. Violette dreams of her daughter's face. Noor sits beneath the stars, tapping invisible messages into her palm. In the silence, they begin to understand what courage really means. It isn't the absence of fear. It's walking straight through it. One afternoon during parachute training, the wind shifts suddenly. Violette hesitates on the edge of the open door. Below her, the field is a patchwork of green and grey, dotted with waiting instructors. The sergeant yells, "Jump!" For a heartbeat, she freezes, then grins, steps forward, and falls. The air rips past her ears. For a moment she is weightless, free. Then the parachute snaps open above her, jerking her back to life. When she lands, Odette is waiting, helping her to her feet. "You took your time," Odette says with a smile. Violette laughs, brushing mud from her face. "Had to make an entrance." They'll only share a handful of moments together, brief sparks before the storm. But in those moments, something solidifies. Friendship, respect, the quiet knowledge that they are part of something far greater than themselves. By spring, their training is complete. The women gather in a dimly lit briefing room, each with a map before them. Cities marked in red: Rouen, Limoges, Paris. Their mission: infiltrate, organize resistance cells, sabotage transport lines, and report German troop movements. The room falls silent as the officer finishes. "This is not glory work. This is survival. You will be hunted. If you're caught, we cannot save you." Noor folds her hands. Then we must not be caught. The officer nods slowly. Godspeed. Outside, rain lashes against the windows as they walk to the airfield. Engines hum in the distance, waiting. Odette turns her face to the storm. Violette lights a cigarette with trembling hands. Noor pulls her coat tighter, her eyes searching the horizon. They do not know that the night ahead will be their last together, but they feel it. That strange stillness before history changes. The engines roar to life, drowning out all thought. And in the flash of lightning that cuts across the sky, 3 shadows climb aboard. The moon hung low and pale over the fields of northern France, its light fractured by clouds, drifting like smoke across the sky. The whine of aircraft faded into the distance, leaving only the whisper of the wind and the rustle of silk parachutes caught in the trees. One by one, shadows moved, gathering their shoots, hiding the evidence, breathing in the foreign air that would now define their existence. The drops had gone as planned. Almost Odette Sansom landed near the small town of Auxerre, her boots sinking into wet grass. She lay still for a long moment, listening. No dogs, no engines, no voices, only the sound of her own heartbeat. When she rose, she began to walk, counting her steps, compass in hand, until the outline of a farmhouse emerged from the darkness. A single lantern flickered in the window. The signal. Inside waited 2 men of the Maquis, the French resistance. They eyed her warily as she entered, pistol drawn but lowered. One muttered, "They sent a woman." Odette's voice was steady. They sent an agent. It was the first of many times she would have to prove herself. Within days, she was forging new identities, coordinating supply drops and organizing sabotage operations. Her radio operator worked from a barn, its walls lined with hay to muffle the sound. Every transmission risked discovery. The Germans could triangulate a signal within minutes. Odette kept her watch by the door, counting seconds as the operator tapped out messages. Troop movements confirmed near Dijon. New railway line under construction. Supplies requested. Then the abrupt order, "Cut signal, move!" They vanished into the woods just before the Gestapo arrived. Black cars, floodlights, and the sound of boots crushing the earth. In Paris, Noor Inayat Khan blended seamlessly into the city's shadows. The air was heavy with tension, posters of missing citizens, German patrols on every corner, whispers of curfews and executions. Noor moved through it all with quiet grace, carrying her radio set in a small suitcase, its hidden compartment sealed with prayer. Her cover name was Jean-Marie Renier. Her job, to send coded messages from safe houses to London. But her world shrank every day. Networks collapsed. Agents disappeared. Radios were seized. The Gestapo were listening, always listening. Noor transmitted from rooftops, attics, even a laundry shop. Each time she tapped out a message, she imagined invisible crosshairs narrowing in. Once she caught sight of 2 men in grey coats watching from across the street. When she looked again, they were gone. That night she moved again, carrying her transmitter through empty streets. Church bells echoed faintly. Somewhere a door creaked open and she froze. A child appeared, half asleep, clutching a toy. Noor smiled softly, placed a finger to her lips, and disappeared into the fog. Her last transmission that week carried the coordinates of an ammunition train, later destroyed by Allied bombers. But with every success came a cost. Her network was thinning, and she was alone. Meanwhile, in Limoges, Violette Szabo had become a force of nature. She moved like a phantom through the countryside, linking resistance groups, delivering weapons, and coordinating ambushes. During one mission, she cycled 70 miles through occupied territory, a bundle of forged documents strapped beneath her coat. Every checkpoint was a gamble. German soldiers lounged by the road, rifles slung casually, eyes sharp. "Papiers, mademoiselle," one demanded. Violette smiled, steady as stone, and handed over her identification. The soldier studied her photograph, too long. Her pulse quickened. Then another guard called out, distracted by a passing truck, and the man waved her through. Only when she turned the corner did she let her breath out. That night, she delivered the documents to a resistance cell leader, Maps, radio codes, and orders from London. "You're taking enormous risks," he told her. "So are you," she replied. "Let's make it count." The following morning, an explosion ripped through a German supply line just as a convoy passed. Flames rose into the dawn. Violette watched from the trees, face lit by orange light, before vanishing once more into the hills. The months passed in a blur of danger and exhaustion. Each woman became part of the machinery of war, unseen but essential. Their messages guided Allied bombers, redirected supply drops, and crippled German communications. But danger pressed closer with each success. Odette's courier was arrested, her false papers discovered. She narrowly escaped through a forest, wading waist-deep in icy water to avoid searchlights. Violette's safe house was raided. She left seconds before the Gestapo arrived. Noor's transmissions were growing too frequent. London begged her to come home. She refused. "Someone has to keep the line open," she radioed back. "I can still work." The reply came through static. "Be careful, Madeleine." "They're hunting you." She smiled faintly at the code name, Madeleine, and switched off the set. The city began to close in. Neighbors looked longer, strangers lingered. Noor's network was unraveling. One night, as rain fell hard over Paris, she heard footsteps echoing behind her. She turned a corner, empty. Another, still empty. Then a reflection in a shop window, a man in a dark coat following. She slipped into an alley, heart hammering, and ducked through a side door into a courtyard. The man's shadow paused at the entrance, scanning. She climbed a wall, tearing her coat, and dropped onto a neighboring roof. From there she could see him, waiting, smoking, patient. She knew then that she was being watched. The Gestapo was closing in. Hundreds of miles away, Odette received her next message. London was preparing something immense, a full-scale invasion. Every detail mattered. The intelligence they gathered would shape D-Day. She stared at the coded sheet, the rain tapping softly against the window, and whispered, "Hold on, girls. Just a little longer." The night was her only ally now, the only thing vast enough to hide her. As the clock struck midnight, Noor sent her final transmission before relocating. "Storm approaching. Stay in the dark." Then she folded the set away, unaware that the sound of her last signal was already echoing across the German intercept stations. Somewhere, a red light blinked on a receiver. The hunt had begun. Autumn 1943. The air over France feels different now. Heavier, sharper, poisoned by suspicion. The resistance networks that once thrived in whispers and courage are unraveling thread by thread. Something is wrong. Radios go silent. Couriers vanish. Messages arrive late or not at all. In safe houses across the country, people lower their voices and lock their doors. The Gestapo has learned their rhythm. Somewhere, someone has talked. Odette Sansom sits in a dim farmhouse near Annecy, staring at the radio that has stopped answering her signals. For weeks, messages from London have arrived distorted, delayed, if they arrive at all. She knows what that means. Someone close is compromised. She writes in invisible ink across her notebook, "Change all contacts. Move west," but before she can act, a knock comes at the door. 3 sharp raps, the resistance signal. She exhales, opens it slightly. A familiar face stands outside. Her contact, Jacques. His smile is tight, his voice calm. "We need to move. Germans are coming," her instincts scream. The words sound rehearsed, but she has no choice. She gathers her coat, her papers, and follows him into the night. They drive for hours through winding forest roads. Odette studies his reflection in the window, a twitch, a flicker, something unreadable. Then from the darkness ahead, beams of headlights cut through the trees. A checkpoint. "German soldiers." "Jacques," she whispers, "what are you doing?" He doesn't answer. The car slows. Soldiers surround them. One taps on her window, rifle raised. Jacques lowers his gaze. "I'm sorry," he mutters. Odette doesn't flinch. She looks him dead in the eyes and says, "You'll regret this." Moments later, hands drag her from the car. They find the false papers, the coded notebook, the cyanide pill hidden in her shoe. Her wrists are bound. The door slams shut behind her as the convoy speeds toward Fresnes prison. In Limoges, Violette Szabo wakes before dawn. A small resistance convoy is set to deliver vital documents across enemy territory, blueprints, orders, names of collaborators. She checks her pistol, loads spare magazines, and smiles faintly at the driver. "Ready to wake the devil?" The man nods. They set out along the narrow countryside road, morning mist curling like smoke around the trees. For an hour, everything is still. Then the stillness breaks. Gunfire erupts from the hills. Bullets pierce the windshield. The driver screams. The truck veers off the road. Violette leaps out, rolling behind a ditch. German troops advance through the fog, rifles raised. She returns fire, short, precise bursts. Her ears ring. The air fills with the stench of burning fuel. Her radio operator shouts, "Run!" "Go!" But she doesn't. She keeps firing, buying him seconds to escape. When her Sten gun jams, she pulls a pistol, firing until the last bullet. Then, click, empty. She throws the weapon aside. German soldiers swarm in. One strikes her in the face. Another tears the map case from her shoulder. She spits blood, glaring up at them, even beaten, even on her knees. She's defiant. They drag her away, but she smiles through the pain. "You'll never find them," she whispers. "You're already too late." Her convoy burned behind her, but the documents, the real ones, were gone, hidden before she left. Noor Inayat Khan feels the walls closing in. Paris is no longer the city she knew. Her contacts are disappearing one after another. Her safe houses are compromised. The Gestapo's radio detectors have traced her transmissions within blocks. Still, she stays. Each night, she moves her transmitter to a new location. Rooftops, basements, empty apartments. Every signal she sends feels like a confession to the night. Every footstep in the stairwell sounds like doom. Then one evening, there's a knock on her door. She freezes, hand hovering over the revolver hidden in her coat. "Who is it?" A soft voice answers, "It's Louis. Resistance." She hesitates. She knows no Louis. She backs away from the door, heart pounding. A second later, the door bursts open. Two men in Gestapo coats rush in. She fires once, missing, then turns to flee. Hands grab her, twist her arm, wrench the gun away. They pin her to the floor. Her radio clatters beside her, still humming faintly. Its signal unfinished. The last thing she hears before they cover her head with a sack is a voice saying, "We've got the Nightingale." Interrogations follow, brutal, endless, methodical. At Fresnes prison, Odette sits in total darkness. Weeks pass. Her nails blacken. Her body weakens. They burn her with irons, pull her nails, suspend her by her wrists, but she refuses to speak. When the Gestapo colonel demands the names of her contacts, she only laughs. "You think you frighten me," she says through broken lips. "I've seen worse men than you, and they're all dead now." He slams the door, leaving her in the dark. She whispers to herself, "Hold on, don't give them anything." In Paris, Noor is imprisoned at 84 Avenue Foch, the Gestapo headquarters. The walls seem to breathe with secrets. Each day, they drag her to the interrogation room. "Who do you work for?" Silence. "Where are the others?" Nothing. They hit her, threaten her, starve her. Still, she says nothing. Once she manages to slip free, climbing onto the roof, searching for a way down. Rain lashes her face. But the courtyard below is filled with guards. She's caught, dragged back, and shackled. Even then, she refuses to surrender her codes. Her interrogator leans close one night, whispering, "Tell us, and we'll spare your life." Noor looks up, eyes calm, voice soft. "I'd rather die." Violette, meanwhile, is taken to Rennes, then to Ravensbrück, the concentration camp for women. She's bruised, half-starved, but unbroken. When another prisoner asks how she endures, Violette smiles faintly. "I just keep thinking," she says, "if I survive, I'll tell them we didn't give in." Not once. By the end of 1943, the network that once spanned France lies shattered. The Germans believe they've won, but the women, those who remain alive, have already won in another way. They've denied their captors everything that mattered. Noor's codes remain unbroken. Violette's documents stay hidden. Odette's silence keeps dozens of agents alive. And somewhere in London, a man reads their last confirmed messages, his voice trembling as he says, They knew the risks. They went anyway. The chapter closes in the dim light of a prison corridor. Noor sits against the wall, humming softly to herself, a tune her father once played on the sitar. A guard stops to listen. "What is that?" He asks. "A prayer," she whispers. He shakes his head, walks on. Noor opens her eyes, whispers to the empty air, "We're still here." Then the door slams, plunging her back into silence. The war outside has become a whisper. Inside the walls, time stands still, marked only by the scrape of boots on concrete, the clang of iron doors, and the slow erosion of the self. They are no longer agents, saboteurs, or soldiers. They are numbers, locked away in cells too narrow for hope to enter. Yet somewhere within that darkness, a light refuses to die. Noor Inayat Khan, Dachau, October 1944. The train stopped long before dawn. When the doors slid open, the smell of smoke and cold iron flooded in. Noor stepped down, her legs trembling after days without food. Around her, women stumbled from the wagons, hollow-eyed, skeletal, wrapped in tattered blankets. The guards shouted orders. A dog barked. The snow under her feet was pink with old blood. Dachau. They took everything, her clothes, her hair, her name. They gave her a number. But inside, she clung to the rhythm of her own heartbeat, a steady reminder, you are still you. She was placed in isolation, forbidden to speak. But silence, Noor learned, could be a weapon. In that silence she prayed. She remembered her father's music, the soft sound of his sitar echoing through the halls of her childhood home in London. She remembered sunlight, laughter, wind through the trees. Each memory became a shield. Sometimes, at night, she whispered in the dark, not to anyone, but to the soul of the world itself. "We are not lost," she said softly. "We are only waiting." A guard once found her humming a melody under her breath. He struck her across the face. She did not cry out. She just turned her head back and whispered, "That was for England. Violette Szabo, Ravensbrück concentration camp." The women of Ravensbrück did not weep anymore. Tears had become useless here. Violette carried bricks by day and corpses by night. The camp smelled of ash and sickness, and the guards shouted until their voices cracked. Yet somehow, within that pit of despair, she found moments of startling humanity. When another prisoner fell, Violette bent to lift her. When a child cried, she gave her a piece of bread, her only food for the day. And when the others spoke of death, she spoke of home. "Do you know what lavender smells like?" She'd whisper to the women beside her. "It grows all round my mother's garden. When the wind blows, it carries the scent right into the kitchen. For a few minutes, the camp would disappear. At night, she wrote imaginary letters in her head to her daughter, Tanya. "My darling girl, if I cannot come home, remember this, I did not stop fighting. Even here, I fight with every breath I have left." One night, a guard dragged her from the barracks. They said her sentence had been decided. She straightened her back, brushed the dirt from her dress, and walked as though she were marching into battle. Her final words before the shot echoed in the yard were simple, almost tender. "Vive la France." The silence that followed was the purest form of defiance. Odette Sansom, Fresnes prison. Then Ravensbrück. Odette's world was darkness. They kept her in solitary confinement for months, a tiny cell with a single bulb that never turned off. Her body was broken, burns, scars, bones that never healed right. Yet her mind, astonishingly, remained clear. When they demanded the names of her contacts, she lied with conviction. When they threatened her family, she smiled. "You can kill me," she told her interrogator, "but you will never make me a traitor." In the dark, she spoke to herself. Small conversations that kept her sane. She imagined her children's laughter, her husband's voice, the sound of waves near her home in Somerset. She even imagined tea, the warmth of it, the smell of it, anything that reminded her of the life beyond the walls. Sometimes she prayed, not for herself, but for the men and women she'd protected by keeping silent. When she was finally transferred to Ravensbrück, she looked like a ghost, but she still walked with her head high. Other prisoners whispered about the English woman who would not break. Once, when the camp commandant threatened to have her shot, she looked him dead in the eyes and said, You can only kill me once. He never touched her again. Fragments of memory in their separate prisons, their lives intertwined in invisible ways. Noor's quiet songs drifted through the night like prayers. Odette's whispered resilience spread from cell to cell. Violette's courage became legend among the women. Even the guards began to sense it, that strange, unyielding strength that no whip or bullet could destroy. In the stillness, they had become something larger than themselves. Final moments, Noor before dawn, they came for her. 2 guards, silent. A field behind the camp. She knew what awaited her, but she did not tremble. As they bound her hands, she whispered her last words in French, clear, unwavering, liberté. The gunfire cracked once, then silence, but the silence did not belong to her captors. It belonged to her. It was the silence of dignity, of peace, of a spirit unbroken. Months later, when Allied troops liberated France, stories of the women spread like wildfire. Locals spoke of the Indian princess who would not speak, the English mother who defied the Gestapo, the young agent who smiled before the bullet. Their names were whispered with reverence. Noor, Violette, Odette, each had faced the unthinkable. Each had refused to yield. In the silence of captivity, they had redefined the meaning of heroism, proving that courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to surrender one's soul to it, somewhere beyond time and war. Perhaps they stand together again, 3 silhouettes in the moonlight, the same light under which they once fell from the sky, unarmed, unafraid, the forgotten figures who refused to be forgotten. Spring came late in 1945. The snow melted into mud, and the world began to breathe again. Allied tanks rolled through the gates of the camps, past barbed wire and the skeletal remains of an empire built on cruelty. At Ravensbrück, the guards had fled. Silence hung in the air, a silence that felt wrong, too big, too empty. The prisoners stood blinking into the daylight, as if afraid it might vanish. Odette Sansom could barely walk. Her frame was little more than bone and determination, her back still bearing the scars of iron and flame. Yet when she saw the British uniforms approaching, she straightened her spine. "You're safe now, ma'am," one soldier whispered. Draping a blanket around her, she nodded slowly. Safe. The word felt foreign on her tongue. As the soldiers helped her from the gates, she turned once, looking back at the camp. The smoke from the crematoriums had stopped rising, but she could still smell it in the air. It was the smell of everything they had lost. In the weeks that followed, Odette was taken to a field hospital in Germany. Her recovery was long and painful, haunted by the ghosts of those who would never leave. At night, she would wake gasping, her hand reaching for something that wasn't there, a radio click, a whispered code, a friend's voice in the dark. One morning, a nurse brought her news. The war in Europe was over. Odette asked only one thing: what of the others? There was no answer, just silence. Later, she learned the truth. Noor Inayat Khan executed at Dachau. Violette Szabo shot at Ravensbrück only months before liberation. The women who had jumped beside her into the black French night were gone. Odette sat in silence for a long time. Then she whispered their names one by one, as though speaking them might bring them back. Noor, Violette. A breath, a tremor. You kept your promise. Months passed. The world began stitching itself back together. Cities rising from ashes, medals pinned to trembling uniforms, flags waving in streets that had forgotten what laughter sounded like. Odette was brought to London. The press hailed her as a hero, the woman who wouldn't break. Cameras flashed, generals saluted, medals glimmered under chandeliers. The George Cross was placed in her hand. She accepted it, not for herself, but for them. "This belongs," she said softly to the crowd. To all who did not return, the applause felt hollow. In the back of the hall, she could almost see them, Noor with her gentle smile, Violette with her quick wit and defiant eyes. They stood like phantoms at the edge of history, watching the world move on without them. As the years passed, their names faded from headlines. New wars came, New heroes took the stage. The women who had parachuted behind enemy lines became footnotes, remembered by few, honored by even fewer. Odette spent her later years in quiet service, visiting schools, speaking not of glory, but of duty, of courage that asks for nothing in return. Sometimes, when she walked through the English countryside, she would stop beneath the same kind of moon that had lit their jump into France. She would close her eyes and imagine it again. The wind, the roar of engines, the leap into darkness. For a moment they were together once more. 3 figures falling through the sky, unafraid, unstoppable, unforgettable. Victory had come, yes, but it had come draped in mourning. Freedom had been reclaimed, but at a price too high for words, and in the quiet corners of memory, where the noise of celebration could not reach. The true cost of war whispered through time, that sometimes the bravest among us are the ones history forgets. Decades later, the world had changed. The cities once turned to rubble, now glittered with lights. The skies that once roared with bombers hummed with passenger planes. Yet somewhere beneath the calm of peacetime, echoes still stirred, faint voices calling from the shadows of history. For years, their stories had been fragments, scattered in dusty archives, whispered by veterans, half remembered by those who once owed them their lives. But the truth, like light through cracks in stone, always finds its way through. It began with a photograph, 3 women in uniform, smiling for the camera before vanishing into legend. Then came the books, the interviews, the documentaries. Slowly, the world began to remember. In London, a statue was unveiled, bronze figures standing side by side in their wartime gear, eyes fixed toward the horizon. The inscription beneath read simply, "To the women who served in silence." Crowds gathered. Wreaths were laid. Among them stood children, grandchildren, and strangers who had only ever read their names in history books. But to them, those names now carried weight, not as myths, but as proof of what ordinary people could do when faced with extraordinary evil. Somewhere in that crowd, an old woman whispered under her breath, "Noor, Violette, Odette." The words trembled in the air like a prayer. In a quiet room years later, a film projector clicked to life. On screen, grainy footage played, parachutes drifting through the night sky over France. A voice, soft and solemn, filled the silence. They fell into darkness, so that others could live in light. The camera lingered on the falling figures, their descent no longer terrifying, but transcendent. The frame slowed, each parachute unfurling like a star against the blackness. Then, one by one, the names appeared. Noor Inayat Khan, code name, Madeline, a writer, a dreamer, a pacifist who carried her radio through the heart of occupied Paris and never once betrayed her comrades. Violette Szabo, code name, Louise, a widow, a mother who fought to her last breath, her final words defiant even in death. Odette Sansom, code name, Lise. A mother of 3 who endured unspeakable torture but never surrendered a name, a code or her humanity. Their faces fade into the clouds, replaced by the flutter of white silk, parachutes disappearing into the night. They were once shadows in uniform, forgotten figures behind enemy lines, but not anymore. Now they live where courage lives, not in medals or monuments, but in every act of quiet bravery that lights the darkness. They fell into darkness, so that others could live in light, and with those words, the screen fades to black. Their names echo one last time, not as whispers, but as eternal flames. Noor, Violette, Odette, forgotten figures no more.